Hi everyone, welcome to Gumtree Live. This is the first ever premiere episode of a new web series that myself and Under the Gumtree staff are starting. We're going to be launching each new issue of the magazine with this little web series going forward, where we will have contributors from the new issue reading a 5-minute excerpt of their piece from the current issue. So we're here tonight to celebrate Under the Gumtree's 3-year anniversary. Yay. So we have, thank you. Thank you. We have a small live audience here in Sacramento joining me. And if you are watching virtually, we apologize for the late start. I've had a little bit of an issue getting some of the folks connected online, but we're ready to go now. So if you're joining us remotely, even here in Sacramento, and you want to tweet about the event, use the hashtag GumtreeLive, and then we can follow the conversation and give you shout outs as we go throughout the night. So before I introduce our first reader, I need to say a huge thank you to my staff, who are all volunteer. And some of those staff members are here, so I'm going to give them a shout out. Robin Martin is my senior editor. Thank you. Kate Ashe is a contributing editor. Katie Walker is my trusty editorial intern. And also, they're not here tonight, but my assistant editors are Becca Littman, Catherine DeJarnette, and Ellison Alcovendez. And those folks really do a great service to help us sift through all of the submissions that we get. So cheers, thank you guys for all your hard work. And then last but definitely not least, Amy Steffen. She's also not able to be here tonight, but she is the designer for Under the Gumtree. And yes, a huge round of applause for Amy. She's responsible for curating all of the fabulous artwork that you see in the magazine, and then doing the page design and the layout to make it look as beautiful as we all know it is. So thank you, Amy. I couldn't do it without you. I couldn't do it without any of my staff. Also, I just want to say, Under the Gumtree is completely reader supported. So that means all of our revenue is from subscriptions and people who buy digital or print copies of the magazine. There are absolutely no advertising in the pages of the magazine, which is part of what makes it so beautiful. So if you enjoy what you hear tonight, I would love if you would pop on over to underthegumtree.com/subscriptions, where you can see the subscriptions that we have to offer. You can get a digital subscription for just $2 a month and a print subscription for $7 a month. And I would really appreciate your support. Excuse me while I... Okay, so we have 7 wonderful contributors who are all in the October issue of the magazine, which is issue 13, lucky number 13. So to start us off, our first reader is originally from England, where she had been writing expressionless research-based articles for medical journals. Her words, not mine. She now lives in Cape Cod with her husband and son, and she discovered creative writing late in life and recently received the Solstice Literary Magazine's award, 2014 Award for Creative Nonfiction. She's working on a book-length memoir, and she's joining us virtually. Please welcome Mary Collins.
Go, Mary.
Strays. My husband pulls into the driveway at around 8, and when he gets to the door, our door, he rings the bell as though already he no longer lives here. Yet everything is as he'd left it. His clothes, but for those he'd packed when he disappeared, are still in the closet. His office left as though he's expecting clients. When they hear his car, the dogs, both female and once strays, bounce around the hallway, inappropriately festive, as though they'd already given up hope he'd ever return. He meets their ecstasy with restraint, but I know him, and know, as he bends briefly toward the one who loves him best, that he is silent out of fear his voice will break. He strides into the living room and settles himself on the chintz sofa we bought 4 years ago, just before we were married. He seats himself at the end closest to the door, barely inside the room, and I go and sit opposite on the frigid edge of the hefty button-back Chesterfield he brought into the marriage, his first therapy couch. For a long time I'd assumed it was leather, some cheerless kind that didn't warm with use. It was a while before I realized it was not the real thing. He throws one arm across the back of the sofa, crosses his legs, and his size 11 foot jiggling with what I've come to know is either impatience or disquiet, he begins. I think you're going to find this helpful to you in dealing with your unresolved feelings about your father, he says, about being abandoned. He is addressing me in his professional voice, the weighty, infallible one I imagine he uses with his therapy clients and with the potentially lunatic. A voice crafted to ensure that what he is saying will be absorbed, that I will know it to be real. He has been gone for 4 weeks, leaving one April day without any hint of having planned to do so, seemingly indifferent to what he left behind, which is to say, our marriage. He'd called from a payphone at the airport, leaving a message on our answering machine for me to find when I got in from work. I'm going to France, I'd heard above the din of flight announcements and final calls. I don't know how long for. It was the treachery of that open-ended waiting that proved hardest to bear. I had no way of contacting him. This was the early 90s, and cell phones were, unlike my husband, a thing of the future. I met someone while I was in Paris, he told our machine, his tone imperious, inexplicably peevish. And I'm going back to see whether it's going to become something or not. Become something? He'd been in Paris 10 days earlier for only 3 days. I'd no inkling of anything having begun there. I'll call you when I get back, he said. Back, he said, not home, as though he'd already moved out. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this is how we'd lived. I walked upstairs, looked inside his open office door, walked into our bedroom. Everything left as though he'd gone out for milk. He's leaving, he's telling me now, for good. He plans to return to France in a few weeks, or perhaps bring her here to live. He might be making a banking transaction or selling a cow for how perfunctory his discourse is. I might be the cow for how vapidly bovine I feel faced with the facts of his perfidy, his precipitous severing of what binds us. Ironically, we'd planned a vacation in the south of France ourselves for the coming summer and had booked a secluded villa close to the sea. I'd cut the pictures from the travel brochure and stuck them to the refrigerator. The shaded patio beside a turquoise pool, the yellow umbrella over a mosaic table. We'd been counting the days, or I thought we had. Evidently, he'd been counting faster than I had. He'd altered our booking, brought it forward, changed the name on the reservation from mine to hers. It was a simple enough substitution. I say very little, cowed as I am, but there are 2 questions that have consumed me in the weeks he's been gone, and I have to ask them. The first, is he going to take the dogs? I've been demented with fear that he might. The second, does he still love me? He makes no pretense at pondering or framing his replies. They are the same on both counts. He leaves without the dogs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. And for those of you watching virtually, I believe you can applause, and it will at least be recorded on the recording of this Hangout. There's a new Google Hangout feature where the virtual audience can applause, and we can hear it. So feel free to clap after each reader, even if you're not here with us. Okay, our next reader is a full-time mom and part-time freelance writer. She's the co-founder of the New River Land Trust, and her piece After in Under the Gum Tree is her first creative nonfiction publication. Please welcome Leslie Howard.
Thank you, Jana, and thank you especially to Jana's husband who got me connected, a miracle of modern technology. So, good, get an extra applause. This is After. After my Gram didn't believe I was pregnant when I put her hand on the kicking in my round belly because Leslie Faye is a little girl and can't have babies yet. After my mom received a call from the Milwaukee Police Department because Gram was wandering the January streets in her nightgown. After Mom scouted an affordable Alzheimer's unit and I completed the paperwork. After we moved Gram in and the doe-eyed nurse said it would be fine in a couple of days, but Mom and I were too upset to eat dinner. After we started sorting through Gram's apartment and I claimed the teapot painted with ruby berries. After I found a stack of Gram's spiral-bound, wide rule journals. After I opened them and found Gram's memories of my mother's childhood, penned, half in longhand, half in shorthand. After I asked Mom if she could read shorthand, and she said yes. After her face shuddered as she deciphered the first half page. After I asked, what does it say? And she said, it's about my father. After I asked, praying she'd answer this time, why won't you tell me about him? After she reported, he used to beat my mother and hold a loaded gun to her head, but then shoot out the ceiling. After she said, don't ask me to talk about it again, I never will. After she threw the journals in the trash and I retrieved them and buried them in my suitcase. After my baby pounded its heels against my ribs as I hoisted that burden into the overhead bin for the flight home, then I knew I was free falling. I'd woven myself from my mother's threaded silences, her best protection from the choking dust of those shot-out ceilings. Her silence is all I knew of mother love, all her silences not mother love enough, and all my loosened selvages demanding re-stitching to weave a new fabric of mother love to bear my baby's lovely weight. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. That was a piece of flash nonfiction. That was the entire piece published in the current issue of Under the Gum Tree. Our next reader is also joining us virtually. He has an MFA in creative nonfiction from CSU Fresno, where he's also worked as the assistant nonfiction editor of The Normal School. His essay, Cracking the Sky, which is published in the current issue of Under the Gum Tree, is part of his first book titled Heavy, a Memoir of Wyoming, BMX, Drugs, and Heavy Fucking Music, which is forthcoming from Rare Bird Press in 2015. Please welcome J.J. Anselmy.
All right, thanks to the Under the Gum Tree staff for putting together such a cool magazine, and thanks, Jana, for all of your thoughtful edits on this piece. It's called Cracking the Sky. I'll never forget my first trip. After a jazz guitarist put 4 drips of acid on my tongue, I decided to go to a party. Driving down busy streets, ecstatic waves crawled up my spine, and my legs felt weightless. At the party house, I stared into a puddle in front of the porch. A burgundy coral reef of interwoven hexagonal patterns extended deep below the water's surface. Chameleons, salamanders, and other lizards inhabited the nooks and crevices of the reef, and the whole scene rotated in a slow geometric dance. Sitting on an old couch inside, I talked about Mastodon, I Hate God, Electric Wizards, Sleep, and other heavy bands with a few of the dudes who lived here. After a few hours, 2 of the guys started asking me if I wanted to go into a back room with them. Are you into it? One guy kept asking. Fear lodged in my throat while a magnetic urge pulsed in my stomach. Looking back, I think I'd been curious about fucking around with another guy for a long time, but I didn't let these thoughts surface. Males dominate the metal world, and most guys in this culture constantly try to impress each other. Underneath the tough guy bullshit, it makes sense that a lot of men in this scene are attracted to each other on some level. But, like me when I was a teenager, won't let themselves admit it. On this night, though, these guys freaked me out in a way that almost seems comical now. I decided that I had to leave. I put Mastodon's Leviathan in my truck's CD player before driving away. Each song seamlessly drifted into the next, and I heard, felt, and saw completely new layers of their music. The sky was a pillowy gray blanket, and trees on the sides of the road writhed, branches wiggling like tadpoles. As an intricately layered prog rock intro from Megalodon seeped through my speakers and changed into an onslaught of chaotic metal, the road waved and dipped, perfectly on beat with music. I've driven on this road before, but I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. I somehow made it back to the co-op after an hour of confusion and wrong turns. I sat in the parking lot, staring at a large white tree in the neighboring yard and still listening to Mastodon. The tree's branches and trunk glowed, illuminated from within. Brent Hines' polyrhythmic guitar work in Hearts Alive expanded into a gelatin chandelier inside my brain. He simultaneously fingerpicks and plays with a regular pick, creating several layers of sound. Listening to Bron Dahler's nimble, Buddy Rich-style fills and ghost notes, I saw a clear image of him playing. Wraith-like tentacles branched from his body instead of arms and legs. I went into my room in the co-op and laid down on a pile of dirty clothes, not wanting to talk to anyone. I pictured one of the guys from the party unzipping his pants and playing with his thick cock. Blood rushed through my body and I jacked off, coming hard and quick. On this night, I started to see sex as a bestial and chaotic whirlpool. The idea of being attracted to only women or men seemed absurd during these moments, and I kept saying to myself, it's all the same, guy or girl, it doesn't matter, it's all the same. But soon afterward, I'd collide against ideas of what I thought a man should be, ideas that I'd been force-fed during my childhood and adolescence in Wyoming, ideas that were also reinforced by the metal world. I'd always thought straight guys were supposed to be perfectly straight, never wondering about the pleasure you could experience with another man. It would still take me quite a while before I could stomach the idea that sexuality can't be confined to rigid, black and white categories. Over the next few months, I'd fantasize about fooling around with a guy and feel oddly detached afterward. Not guilty necessarily, but empty. I'd always felt like Hearts Alive was just beyond my grasp. Tonight, the song opened into a kaleidoscopic room, and I thought about how beautiful it would be to live here. The song is epic, with transitions from mellow, jazzy sections into balls-out rock and roll, and one of my favorite guitar solos. I was beginning to understand that heaviness is largely about context. The smartly crafted rock is often heavier than relentless thrash metal. I was beginning to understand many things. The subtlety can challenge listeners in productive ways. When you have to listen closely, the overall experience is often more meaningful. But I have to focus my attention, shutting everything out but the present, to hear each layer of music and how these layers interweave and complicate each other. That, beneath my view of the world, there will always be new layers of thought, new ways to see. Thank you.
Thank you, JJ. Our next writer is joining us here in Sacramento. She has work that has appeared in the Washington Post, Yoga Journal, Sunset, and the Bellingham Review. And she's the co-founder of Roan Press, a small nonprofit literary press. And I will also say she's a returning contributor to Under the Gum Tree. She was also part of our premiere issue. So please welcome Kate Washington.
Thank you. I'm reading from my piece, Promises Like Pie Crust. A pie's promise is often broken. So much can go wrong, especially with the crust. Too much water, too much flour, too much fat, any of these will ruin you. The dough will stick and smear if it isn't cold enough, or crack if it's too cold, or just fall apart. My mother taught me to make pie crust early. It was a family tradition, and while I sometimes got it right, I often didn't. Once at age 10 or so, I couldn't get the crust to cohere. I threw it all over our kitchen in a fit of rage, a shower of flour and fat cut with 2 knives until it resembled small peas, as the classic instruction goes. My mother, who had ruined her share of pies, was more understanding than my tantrum deserved. She helped me clean up and make a new crust. My mother used the recipe in the old Fanny Farmer cookbook with the golden cover. I have inherited her book, and it automatically flips open to the flowery, annotated page. My mother may have been a traditionalist who baked pies from scratch, but she was also a math and computer science major and a computer programmer, and she worked out precise measurements for 10 and 8-inch pies for single and double crusts. The symmetry of using pi for the calculations pleased her. She would not stand for clumsy, rough doubling of the recipe, which might result in too much crust or not enough when she rolled it out. Too much would have meant more pie cookies for me and my brother, but she always eked out pie cookies anyway, rolling out extra dough and trimmings in any old shape, sprinkling it with cinnamon sugar, cutting the irregular round into wedges and baking them on a warped oven-blotched cookie sheet until their edges were brown and the middles of the crust blistered. Whenever my mother made the pie, I snitched the bland, crisp, salty sweet pie cookies all day long. Crisco was my mother's and my grandmother's fat of choice. No butter for them, though I use it now for the flavor it adds, and salt, the only flavoring in their crusts. Sugar came only in the filling, though never much. My maternal great-grandmother, according to family tradition, made her pie crust too short. My maternal grandmother's crust was perfect. She wasn't the usual grandmotherly sort. She was 5'10", made to seem taller by a frosted bouffant that she had combed out twice a week. When she and my grandfather traveled to Hong Kong and London and Thailand, her first concern was always to find a hairdresser. And she wore a long gold rope necklace and jangling bracelets dripping with heavy gold coins. 14 years after her death, I wear that gold rope necklace and it still smells like her perfume. She was renowned in the family for her lemon meringue pie, a Shirley Golden number that was a lot like her. My mother made all kinds of pie. My favorite was the apricot pie she made in early summer. Its modest, lumpy layers tasted deeply of happiness and loss, thanks to the bittersweet tang of intensely orange halves of collapsed, homegrown stone fruit, slightly almond-scented. The apricot trees my father's father planted at the edge of his almond orchard are long dead, and my parents long divorced. But that pie's memory haunts me. My mother, too, embodied a complex balance of bitter and sweet, suffering from bipolar disorder marked by bouts of crippling depression, controlled for decades by lithium. For every perfect pie, for every moment of teaching me how to hold the rolling pin just so, there had been a countervailing slump of despair or a moment of rage. However bad she felt, though, she could usually rally for a holiday or a potluck, and she usually promised to bring pie, key to the season. Eggnog pie was for Christmas, a fluff of gelatin-set whipped cream full of bourbon. Sour cream and raisin pie was another holiday offering, a gritty gray, old-fashioned Californian pie with the raisins cut in half and a meringue top. It was her grandmother's recipe, and she told me that her job as a small child used to be to cut the raisins in half and dig out the seeds, back in the days before raisins came already seedless. Golden summer pie was another whipped cream gelatin concoction, with nectarine slices suspended in an orange-scented fluff. She cut that recipe out of our local newspaper. In spring, she made rhubarb pie and lemon rhubarb pie and strawberry rhubarb pie. Late summer meant Gravenstein apple pie, for which we brought lugs of the winey early fruit in West Sonoma County near our family cabin, and peach and plum with walnuts in it. For Thanksgiving, there was pumpkin. The secret was the applejack, she always said. An apple cranberry and pear pie with a custard cream layer. One year, we went to Kansas for Thanksgiving to visit my father's extended family in their rambling rural farmhouse. The main thing I remember about our Midwestern Thanksgiving is that the pies were store-bought, and my mother was genuinely shocked.
Thank you, Kate. We're going back to one of our remote readers who also has an MFA in creative nonfiction from CSU Fresno. She's a columnist for the Merced Sun-Star and lecturer in the Merit Writing Program at UC Merced. She lives with her husband, teenage sons, 3 dogs, 2 cats, 1 goat, a pig, and a recently acquired gecko. Please welcome Bridget Bowers.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start. I don't think my picture's up there, but I can't tell. So here is attempted homicide. The banners lining the entrance to Kingsburg, a Swedish town in the middle of California's Central Valley, say Välkommen. Kingsburg, which had a population of about 5,000 in 1991, features Dalla horses, chalet-style roofs, and a Swedish windmill. And yet there are as many Garcias and Zhangs in its phone book as there are Sorensens. And if you were to step inside any of the antiques and collectible stores downtown, stores painted blue and yellow with peaked roof lines and scalloped window frames, you would find a typical Central California structure built in the 1940s with buckled linoleum floors, asbestos tile ceilings, and fluorescent lights. In the years I lived in Kingsburg, the owner of a Swedish gift shop was in the habit of wearing black tights, petticoats, a pinafore, and wooden clogs as she strolled the main street of town, even when it was 103 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Though Kingsburg was pleasant and clean, I could never quite shake the feeling that there was something unsettling, perhaps even spooky, about a town modeled on the villages of the Alps, but actually located in a desert that had never seen so much as an inch of snow. It was on the outskirts of Kingsburg where I first conceived the idea of killing Dan McDonald. We lived a mile east of town on an acre near the Kings River in a 2-bedroom bungalow, and I began thinking about murder when I shot a hole through Dan's toilet in the early spring of 1991. The toilet was really a planter, an Easter present given to us by Dan's mother, a flustered round woman with a tragic perm. Mrs. McDonald had bought the toilet in the foothill community of Auberry at a church sale. It was about 1 foot tall, painted neon yellow, and represented the two things I loathed most about Dan's family: their astonishing absence of taste and their allegiance to the Nazarenes. Catholic or even Methodist rummage sale, I might not have looked upon it with such enmity. But no, it had been bought at a fundraiser for the Church of the Nazarene, a religion that is only a step or two up from holy rollers and snake handlers. I had been willing to give the Nazarenes the benefit of a doubt until the day I overheard his father, a preacher who had acquired his divinity degree from a mail-order school he had read about on a matchbook cover, tell a parishioner that the children of Somalia were starving because their parents had not accepted Jesus as their savior. And so on that spring morning in 1991, I had decided to throw the toilet away and was in the process of slipping it into the outside trash bin when Dan intercepted me and forced a deal. He would let me discard the toilet, but only if I could shoot a hole through it. He would place the toilet at the far end of our acre, and if I could hit it from where I stood, he said, I would be allowed to dispose of it. But if I lost, the planter was going in the house to be displayed in the center of our dining table on top of a doily. The odds were stacked against me. I was scared of guns. My little experience with them had been while accompanying boyfriends on hunting trips during my teenage years. In those days, every time I shot, the recoil threw me backward. But my fear of guns was not as strong as my motivation to rid myself of the toilet. So when Dan gave me the .22 and said, "Go ahead, shoot," I remembered the lessons my boyfriends had tried to teach me so many years before. Take your time, they had said. Aim a little higher than the target. I took my time. I aimed high, steadied my hand, willed away my fear, and then I shot. "I'll check it," Dan said. His pointed cowboy boots made sucking noises in the mud as he walked away from me. I watched him hitch up his sagging Wranglers, take a Marlboro from his shirt pocket, saunter the length of our small corral. He had the self-conscious gait of a man who had never become accustomed to his size, a kind of half-lope that seemed at once masculine and vulnerable. I could kill him now, I thought. Lift the rifle, pull and push the bolt, and squeeze the trigger. He was close enough at first that I couldn't miss. But he was so big, 6'5" and 220 pounds, a former lineman on his high school football team, that I wondered if he could even be killed by a .22. And then there was the problem of explaining a bullet in his back to the Kingsburg police, a motley collection of overweight, bottom-of-the-class academy graduates. None of them could ever aspire to the talents of Sherlock Holmes or even Encyclopedia Brown, but still, they would have questions. So, instead of shooting Dan, I bent down and pinched just a bit of dried horse manure and sprinkled it into the full beer can he had left behind. "Son of a bitch!" he shouted from the far end of the corral. He was peering down at the toilet. Could I really have hit my target? And then, in a sudden rush of adrenaline, I feared that I might have angered him. Why hadn't I thought of that before, when we first made the bet? I gauged how long it would take to get my purse and keys and make it to my car. I was not sure where my purse was, or if my keys were in it, and if he tracked me in the house, it might be worse than if he caught me out in the open. In any case, I knew there was no time for escape. He was already walking back, and if he saw me running, then he would run too, and I could not outrace him. So I stood there and waited for Dan to return with the broken toilet. I noticed there was no anger in his stride, which could be good, but might not mean anything. He showed me the hole at the base, and then he walked to the garbage can and threw the toilet away. "I never really thought I'd hit it," I said. "Neither did I," he said. "Here's your beer," I said, and he took it.
Thank you, Bridget. Our next reader is joining us virtually. He is pursuing an MFA in Creative Nonfiction at Chatham University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he's previously worked as a teacher in China teaching English as a second language for all ages, and he's an active member of West Virginia University's Appalachian Prison Book Project. Please welcome Johnny Blevins.
Hi, everybody. I've timed this with some thanks, so I hope you can put up with me for a second. Thanks to Under the Gumtree. This is my first publication. I just wanted to thank all my friends watching. They're watching virtually, and my wife's upstairs watching, which is kind of weird. You know, this is the future. And my brother's here, and I'm going to read about my mom, and he's never read anything I've written. So here we go. Which person she is. My mom has cooked a cocktail of from-scratch Southern foods, not microwaved, not made by my father, and not purchased but from a fast food restaurant. This is different. I'm excited. She looks specifically happy this day, her yellow hair bowed in perfect waves. We sit at the table, framed as a faultless family. Mom, Dad, brother, and egghead me. I haven't grown into my giant platinum blonde head yet. Other kindergartners think I'm funny, like a cartoon character, but I wonder if it's because I look the part or because I want more than anything to be a cat. The table is set to song. Fork, spoon, spoon, knife, spoon, spoon, knife, napkin, bowl, bowl, plate. Today, Mom thinks she must eat every liquid and semi-liquid with a different spoon, but I'm not rehearsed for this show. I contaminate the chicken soup with some brown gravy, mashed potatoes. She says stop. I take the steak in my hands. She says stop. I start chewing on the whole fork-stabbed steak without using a knife to saw it into pieces. She shrieks. My meal accelerates from me, the tablecloth and everything on it yanked to the floor in my mother's vice grip. Past the crashes and splashes, the only thing I remember is my mother, red, on fire. I think she messed up the magic trick. In years prior, I had let myself think I was simply uncool, but by the time I'm 9, I admit to myself I hate all the kids at grade school. I'm not a big fan of spending time with my mother anymore either, so I ask video games to raise me. My mom, with clipped hair and lensless Sarah Palin specs, tries time after time to steal me from the Mario Brothers and make me do homework or learn something. I'm not interested again and again. In an act of desperation, she fills out a nurse's performance review chart and hands it to me. I don't demonstrate effective communication skills. I don't listen effectively. I do not provide constructive feedback to, scratched out and rewritten, Mommy. I do not show a sincere interest in others and their concerns, don't initiate and develop relationships with others. It makes sense, perfect sense written out like that. I agree to listen to a famous psychologist, Anthony Robbins, from a CD. I take notes about how fear is a very natural emotion we feel simply to prepare for things to come. We need fear. I get it now. I begin to hate the kids at school even more because they can't seem to grow the fuck up, like my mom says. But I hear their babbling, and I pretend to like them, and I learn to like mother, mom, and mommy, whoever she wants to be that day. Mom volunteers to be the school nurse for my 6th grade Washington, D.C. trip. I'm nervous, but the cute girl with the rhyming name tells me, your mother is the best chaperone, and so she is for that day of the trip. The next day, my fun mom with the wild brown curls doesn't think her group of girls needs to go to the National Archives building to see the Declaration of Independence. She takes her group of girls to dance in an almost nearby fountain instead. I am irritated when Miss Teacher rolls her eyes at my mother and barks at the girls to dry off, says she couldn't find the girls for hours, minutes, and that it's so unprofessional, and are you crazy, Miss Blevins? I want to say, Mrs. Blevins, you fuck, but I'm 12 and I'm not entirely sure how to use it outside of scolding a child. I don't say anything, but I shove a frown at my mom when she shrugs and laughs. My little dude friends remind me my mother is a good person today. The girls with and without tits are showing through their wet clothes. I'm embarrassed, but only in the way a tween is embarrassed when my mom has fun in public. They kept thanking me. She had given those girls condoms and explained blowjobs. It's 7 p.m. or later, and I'm at high school. There's no football practice today. It's not football season. There's no tennis practice. It's snowing outside. I've been crushing old acorns for 5 hours. I know they're usually toxic, but I still lick the nut inside just to see. Tires screech coming up the hill, and I know it's my dad, and I hope he's not so worried he'd risk crashing on the icy road. Nobody here to protect me except for him sometimes. My dad is a steady ornament in my life. He hasn't really been around for much of it, has he? Get in, he says. I gotta go home. I got home and you weren't here, he says. John, I'm starting to think she's crazy. Yeah. I say, yeah, but I feel like a traitor saying it. Thanks.
Thank you, Johnny. Our last reader is joining us here in Sacramento. She's a writer, educator, and poet who has published 2 chapbooks of poetry. Her poems have appeared in Late Peaches, Sacramento Voices, and Canary, a literary journal of the environmental crisis. She's also a board member at the Sacramento Poetry Center. Please welcome Wendy Williams.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Robin, Jana, and all the staff. It's been a wonderful experience. Carrie. She is up against the wall, and her cheeks are very red. Is it Carrie? Yes. Carrie laughing, giggling, 2 boys holding her wrist over her head and pressing them tightly against the bricks. Anthony is feeling her up while everyone watches. The Boyeviches, Manzano, Ray, and is that Armida, Anthony's girlfriend? Yes. And Margaret, too, and Michelle Viviano, Anthony and Ray's sister. I am coming down the 4th grade fire escape steps, but freeze when I see them. Mrs. Sherwood, my teacher, has already shut the heavy door. Quietly, I her foot carefully to hear me. What would they do? Hold me up against the wall? No, I don't have tits like Carrie. No tits at all. Ray turns his owl eyes on me for a brief second, then looks away, almost as if to say, I don't count. I can't take my eyes off Carrie. She turns her head and sees me. Her eyes are shocked. 2 large brown tacks stuck to her face, no blinking. Her lips bunched up. How can I save her? Anthony, she protests, as she does every lunch hour on the school courtyard when he chases after her. Is she kidding now, or for real? That's what she gets for flirting with the hard guys, I think, stepping down off the fire escape. The bad kids with black leather jackets, the cool, cute boys. They will never choose me with my long skirts, short clipped hair, eyeglasses, and briefcase brimming with books. Carrie's tall with large bones and breasts, thick bouncing curls and smooth, creamy skin. She's large for her age, 10 like me, but it wasn't so long ago that she jumped rope with us girls and danced a Scottish jig in the schoolyard. Round and round on one foot she hopped, her red knee sock inching down her calf, her other foot kicking briskly in and out. She held her right arm proudly up, fingertips lightly touching the top of her head as she spun. Her other hand rested on her hips. Carrie was the center of our circle, and we clapped in time to her leaping, black, patent leather shoe. I heard the drone of the bagpipes and the rich, many-pitched tones. Her plaid kilt flicked up when she kicked, and I repeated her last name over and over in my mind, Macready, Macready. Her mouth was open just slightly, and her cheeks were red. Her eyes shone with confidence. Carrie knew what she was doing. Whenever the dancing girls came on the TV, Dad reached for the binoculars. There were two kinds, what he called his Opry glasses that looked as if they were made out of pearl, and his battered metal field binoculars. When he lifted the Opry glasses to his eyes, he raised his pinkies to show the fineness of his breeding and the tip-top manners of his class. "What ho!" he exclaimed in his nasally voice, pronouncing the T emphatically. "Well, I say, James," he continued, the row of legs kicking up in unison. When he chose the field glasses, he went all out. "Look, Mom, I see Pussy." "Meow, meow." "Okay, Bill." He wouldn't quit until Mom said something. "Grrr, ruff, ruff." He started up again. It was usually Saturday night when the dancers came on. I'd just taken my bath, and my feet were soft and ripe for the picking. I sat on the couch pulling skin off the bottom of my feet, strip by strip, starting with my big toes. And when I ripped too deeply, I jumped, startled. Blood spurted out, and I knew I'd gone too far. Then I moved on to the balls of my feet and my heels, the cuticles of every finger. It took a long time, and I was so absorbed I'd completely forgotten about the show. Before I knew it, Mom was telling me to brush my teeth and go to bed. My feet stung as I walked to the bathroom. Stepping off the fire escape, I hurry across the black asphalt. Finally, I am past them beyond the brick corner of the school gym. I sneak a look back. I know I'm risking a lot if they see me again, but I have to know what they are doing to her. Anthony's palm moves slowly back and forth over Carrie's boobs. Then he presses his whole body up against her. He spreads his legs wide and bends at the knees, pushing up into her again and again. And everyone is laughing. Armida, too. Is she crazy? Her own boyfriend? Carrie screams. "No!" I hear her yell. It's a definite refusal. But I'm afraid to look again. Carrie needs my help. "Anthony!" I hear her yell. But now it's that flirty, playful voice. Carrie screams again, and I run. I know I'm abandoning her, but I keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to all of our readers, and thank you all for joining us. If you aren't already following us online, we're on all of the social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. Sign up for our email list. Be sure and get the announcement when we will have our next edition of Gumtree Live in January when we release the next issue. Thank you all, and good night.